it's a big story. It's a royal snub for the government. The Supreme Court today threw out the review petition in the Vodafone tax case in just a one-line judgment. This means the government will now have to return the 2,500 crore rupees it deposits to Vodafone with a 4% interest immediately.
But the battle is far from over. The government has already proposed an amendment to the IT Act in the budget to tax Vodafone-like transactions, and so it's all set to raise a fresh tax demand once the finance bill is passed. So will the big British telco be able to save $2 billion in taxes, or will the final round go to the government? That's our big story tonight. Vodafone Counsel Harish Salve spoke first to ET Now a little while ago. He expressed his happiness at the verdict but maintained that Vodafone continues to have legal options both in India and abroad.
Well, what happens next is something which you should be asking the government. I would refuse to speculate on what the government will do. They propose to amend the law. They will amend the law. We will see what is to be done with the amended law.
So do you expect another petition after the government retrospectively changes the IT Act?
Well, I don't know what we will do, but I'll be surprised if Vodafone happily and with a smile on its face writes a check.
Sure. So just one last question. In the event that retrospective changes are made to the IT Act, what legal recourse does Vodafone have?
Vodafone has various legal recourses in Indian courts and otherwise.
Take you then, of course, to Devdatta Das, who's been covering the story through the day. Devdatta, we did notice earlier in the evening that the top management of the government was running into North Block to discuss what would be the next strategy. How worried is the government?
The government should really be worried on one hand because the Supreme Court has been very firm on its own judgment. They have completely quashed the petition that the government brought forth. It was a three-bench bench that decided on this behind closed doors, and it was presided over by the Chief Justice of India, who was key behind making the judgment in the first place that the government has to give back the money to Vodafone and not vice versa. It has opened up again the can of worms as far as the judiciary versus the executive is concerned, where now again you see the entire retrospective proposal that has been brought in, but at the same time that is the retrospective effect that will work for the government, because that's now what they are looking at, because from whatever government sources are telling us, there will be no other petition that will be put in to challenge this verdict of the Supreme Court, but at the same time what they have at their hand is something that will work for them very well. The retrospective budget proposal, which when it changes into legislation, will work wonders for them, get the money back for the government, essentially. In fact, we caught up with Salman Khurshid. Let's listen into what he has to say. He's the law minister, and he is the brains behind what legal recourse the government has now.
I said that the review has been dismissed, and the review is dismissed. The law remains what has been stated by the Supreme Court. I don't think there is any further decision or any further discussion on this matter, but we are all aware that there is a provision which is being proposed in the finance bill. The consequences of the passage of that bill and whatever provisions are provided in that bill will then rule the law of the land.
The government, they're making it stand very clear, but here's a response from Vodafone. In a strongly worded statement, they maintain that the Supreme Court's clear and unambiguous ruling today, based on existing laws of India, reiterates that the Indian Tax Authority does not have the jurisdiction to tax the transaction. The company says it looks forward to the return of the deposit money immediately.
Question is, the first two rounds went to Vodafone, but the battle is not quite over. Could it be that the last laugh will be the government's? To discuss the impact of Supreme Court's decision today and the government's move to tax transactions with a retrospective amendment, we have three special guests with us coming through the studio.
That's right, Shaili. Pranav Seth, our tax partner at Ernst & Young, noted lawyer Mohit Saraf joins us here in the newsroom, and we've got Bundeep Singh Rangar, again at the FIIView, chairman of IndusView, joins us live from Ontario in Canada. Pranav, I want to kick this off with you because the battle clearly is far from over. Is it a certainty that the government, once it makes those amendments, will raise a fresh demand notice?
Well, the government in all likelihood will raise the fresh demand notice, I feel, if they do carry out the amendments. That seems to be the intent as is being expressed. But whether Vodafone will challenge the retrospective amendment of the law or will it pay is the big question. And whether Vodafone alone will challenge or there will be others who will join them in the challenge, because there are several impacted companies in this country, as we know. There are several other transactions of a like nature which also will get impacted if this retrospective amendment really stands. So the demand may be raised if this bill is passed, but whether that will be accepted by Vodafone or whether it will be challenged is a big question. My suspicion is it will get challenged.
But Mohit Saraf, you're the lawyer here. Does Vodafone have grounds to challenge a retrospective change to tax laws? Because here's a Supreme Court judgment that is in favor of Vodafone. Will it have a case to challenge it in the Supreme Court?
I think we are very clear that government has a power to come up with a retrospective changes in tax law. I think that is clear. But that amendment and that tax law has to actually pass the scrutiny of Article 14 and Article 19 of the Constitution of India, which is a fundamental right. And I think Vodafone would have a lot of grounds to challenge that, because in my view, because if this amendment is excessive in nature, and I think the Supreme Court clearly mentioned that that was not the original intent. What the amendment is trying to do is that they are saying it is more clarificatory in nature. It is not really a levy of new charge or new tax, but it is just it is basically, it was always there and we've just clarified the matter. But I would say that will be a lot of, I think there will be a lot of legal battle, and I think I heard Harish Salve talking about it, that they would actually have a strong case. But again, it all depends on how the Supreme Court looks at it. Where it is not something that one can say that it will be withheld or not withheld. But government at the Parliament has
Mohit,
the power.
Let me quickly get in Bundeep Singh's view as well. We certainly are seeing that the battle is on, as you pointed out. Bundeep Singh Rangar, do you think that in many ways this move today, a second victory of sorts for Vodafone, and the government's concern of not being able to convince the Supreme Court of their stand, is coming in the way of the way people are looking at investments in India? You think that's a big challenge?
Absolutely. I think the sentiment is, is this a two-step backward process where in the past people have got, bad memories of having things either reversed or things taking too long. And what people want from overseas when they're investing is some sense of regulatory stability, some sense of predictability, and more certainty. And by potentially retroactively applying the law that goes back, 6 years or 50 years, who knows which one is true, just the fact that it's retroactively applied is wrong. Never mind the fact that it sets a really bad ground for the future at a time when India needs to get its GDP up and boost foreign investment. This is a very bad signal, and I think it's something that could not only be taken up by multinationals bilaterally, this could come up in the World Trade Organization discussions on free trade, and has the potential to impact India's discussions on free trade with the EU and Canada. So this is overall nothing positive at all.
If I may come to you now, looking at the kind of options that lie ahead, and as Mohit Saraf pointed out, we're going to be in for some serious legal tangle ahead, something that I'm sure both parties have been geared up to. But what are the options, let's say, for Vodafone and for the government at the moment?
I would feel for the government, of course, it has proposed this legislation. If it does go through, then the options for Vodafone, I feel, would be one, of course, to pay up. But more likely, I would feel, is the option where they would challenge the retrospective amendment if it does go through in Parliament. And the constitutional challenge, as was referred to by my colleague, would probably be in the form of Article 14 being challenged. I'm not too sure about Article 19, but yes, that's also one option. And probably the sheer unreasonableness of this, that after having fought this battle in law courts for over 5 years and having succeeded, to now come up with a retrospective amendment, is that reasonable at all, would be the big question.
Bundeep Singh, Rangar, I want to get you in here because, this whole issue of foreign investor sentiment getting hit has been taken up with the government as well. And the finance secretary said that foreign investors chase profits. They don't chase tax-free zones. India needs clarity as far as taxation of cross-border deals is concerned. And this amendment gives that clarity. Why the big deal then?
Well, look, this is not chasing profit. This is chasing, especially the Vodafone case, it's penalizing the acquirer rather than penalizing the company that got sold and the capital gains imposed there. This is a complete reversal of what it should be. And moreover, if you think about Indian companies buying assets overseas, companies don't have to pay for local assets purchased in the same fashion that the Indian tax bill now that's been proposed has potentially to offer. I think that's where the big discrepancy lies. This is not profit, and corporate income tax is one thing. This is a retroactive application on asset purchases, which is a whole different ballgame, and that's really disturbing. And to in many ways, foreign companies have many choices right now. It's not like India is the only story of growth out there. They can go to Africa, they can go to South America, Far Eastern economies, and if you take a risk-weighted adjustment, this just increased India's risk profile, and to some extent will make it unpalatable for some foreign investors. They'd rather go elsewhere. There's more certainty with a similar reward scenario.
Motsaraf, you heard Harish Salve say that that Vodafone may consider legal options within India and outside. What are these legal options outside India that Vodafone could consider?
I think he probably must be hinting about the bilateral investment treaty. I think the mood is pretty, after the 2G's cancellation and the White Industries case, that everybody sees that, okay, they can actually sue the government for destroying the value of investment. But again, that is okay. These are all options. How successful you can get on an option where courts and the law clearly say that you can retrospectively amend laws and tax laws. I think the key question here will be, can this surpass the test of 14, which is reasonableness, and 19? That's the key question. I don't think bilateral investment treaty would really get anywhere, in my view. That's my personal view. But I think the question
would you react to that really? Because that is an important part, and various players would try and use other means to try and save their cases, such as this one.
Right. I think the Parliament in that sense is sovereign. The Supreme Court of India decision is the law of the land. I don't think that it would be easy to challenge the decision of the Supreme Court anywhere outside of India. That's my feeling, though I'm not really a constitutional expert. My feeling, therefore, is that if the Supreme Court sustains this particular retrospective amendment, then it might not be easy to challenge it elsewhere, because the Supreme Court decision would be the law of the land as far as India is concerned under the Indian Constitution. That's my feeling.
But the Supreme Court judgment in the first place also should be the law of the land, which is that there should be no tax on this transaction.
Sure. And that's where the whole point comes, that if you make a retrospective amendment, the Supreme Court has in previous precedents held that the Parliament has the power to legislate. And the power to legislate under the Constitution takes within its fold the power to legislate retrospectively. Now here, therefore, the Supreme Court has repeatedly held in the past that there is a power to legislate retrospectively, but that power to legislate retrospectively has to be exercised reasonably, which is within the parameters of, for example, Fundamental Rights, Article 14. It has to be not to reverse the decision of a Supreme Court in a particular case that has already been delivered. One could change it in a manner that changes the parameters of the law, as a result of which that decision might change. But here's a case where Vodafone has already succeeded. It has probably already received the refund for all we know. Now to change it, also Vodafone is the payer. It's not the income earner itself. And therefore, it is really being asked to pay more in the nature of a penal levy for not having withheld tax at source. All of these are really big challenges, I feel, that in Vodafone's own case, the matter has been decided in its favor, that it is only a payer, that probably this goes against the fundamental principles and the fundamental rights under Article 14 and the right to do business under Article 19. All of this will be tested, and if the Supreme Court feels thereafter that the previous precedent...
that's the test that I want to bring back into the discussion. And Mohit, I want to ask you this. The finance minister was pretty clear. He said, call us the command economy or what have you, but this entire move in the budget is to try and bring clarity. Do you think there could be an overreaction on saying that this is going to send out a bad signal? Could people look at it as finally saying, I'm going to put a law of the land, which will then become the law of the land?
I tell you one thing, this particular provision is good in a way that it clarifies the tax laws going forward. None of us are challenging that. I think what we are challenging is the retrospectiveness. When these people invested in India, last 20 years people have invested in India, they invested on certain basis. Now you can't hold Parliament ransom to promises which has been made. That we all understand that. But I think the entire amendment is taking the entire basis away. That's what Harish Salve was talking, that he would actually, probably he would go against the government on the bilateral investment treaty, and that's a very valid argument. And these are the things, and I think the problem is not clarity going forward, but the problem is that you've actually, one of the basic, I remember the basic thing which the Supreme Court said, that the predictability of regulatory regime is an essential part of a rule of law. Now, by this retrospective amendment, they've just said that we don't have a rule of law, and that is the problem.
All right. Keep the law, but let it move forward rather than look back. That's the verdict on our shore. We are still waiting to see who's going to have the final laugh. That's something no one can guess just yet. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us, each one of you. There's so much around that Vodafone deal or the lack of that.